Most people use Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace for ordinary reasons. They need a couch, they need a crib, they need to clear out a garage before moving day. Most of the time, the exchange lasts less than 10 minutes. A few messages, an address, cash, and both people go home. But these sites and apps depend on one risky thing: trust between strangers who know almost nothing about each other. The 4 stories in this episode all begin with a simple listing: a generator, a nursery set, an arcade cabinet, a free sectional, and in each case, the person answering that listing was not interested in a normal sale. Story 1. The Generator. In September of 2021, Tyler Mercer was 37 and living outside Redding, California. He worked as an electrician, had a 9-year-old son every other week, and was behind on 2 payments for the truck he needed for work. That month, after another fire season filled with smoke and outages, Tyler decided to sell the backup generator he had bought the year before. It was a heavy red Honda model that could run refrigerators, lights, and a well pump. He listed it on Craigslist for $1,400. By Friday afternoon, he had received 11 messages. 9 were low offers. 1 was obvious spam. The last one was from a man named Seth Holcomb, who said he would pay the full amount in cash that weekend. He said his family's walnut orchard south of Cottonwood had lost power twice in a month, and he needed a generator strong enough to keep the pump running if it happened again. He asked 2 questions only. Did it start on the first pull, and could Tyler prove it would hold a load? Tyler wrote back and said yes to both, but he wanted to meet in a public place. Seth answered within a minute. He said that would not work. The generator weighed more than 200 pounds. He was already on the orchard property repairing irrigation lines, and he needed to see it running on the pump before handing over that much cash. He sent his phone number and asked Tyler to call if he wanted to talk it through. The voice on the phone matched the messages. Seth sounded patient. He sounded local. He knew the names of side roads and feed stores in the area. He said he had another worker on the property to help lift the machine, and he said Tyler would be back on the highway in less than half an hour. Nothing in the conversation gave Tyler a firm reason to say no. He still took one small step. He texted his sister, Jenna, the address Seth had sent, and told her that if she did not hear from him by 5:30, she should call. On Saturday, Tyler loaded the generator into the bed of his truck, strapped it down, and left around 4 o'clock. The address Seth had sent led to a rural road lined with orchards and dry grass. The first gate matched the pin, but when Tyler got there, he found a chain across it and a new message from Seth. Main gate stuck. Use the service road on the east side. White pickup by the pump house. The service road was narrower. It cut between 2 rows of trees and ended near a square concrete building with peeling paint and a rusted metal roof. A white Ford pickup was parked next to it. A tall man in a tan work shirt waved as Tyler pulled in. A younger man in a gray sweatshirt stood by the open side door of the building. The older man said he was Seth. The younger man was his nephew, Cole. Both men looked ordinary. Their clothes were dusty. Their boots were wet near the soles. There was a long black hose coiled near the pump house and a toolbox open on the ground. The scene matched what Seth had described closely enough that Tyler shut off his truck and got out. At first, the meeting followed the usual pattern. Seth asked a few questions about oil changes and hours of use. Cole climbed into the truck bed to look at the frame and serial plate. Seth said he wanted to hear it run before he counted out the cash. Tyler agreed. Together, the 3 men lowered the generator onto a dolly and rolled it inside the pump house. The building was larger than it looked from the road. The front room held an old pump, a workbench, and shelves filled with tools. Against one wall were items that did not seem related to orchard work at all: box televisions, leaf blowers, chainsaws, pressure washers, and 2 mountain bikes. Tyler looked at them, and Seth noticed. "Estate clean out," Seth said. "My brother buys storage units." It was a simple answer. Tyler kept moving. Tyler filled the tank, checked the choke, and started the generator. It came alive on the second pull. Seth nodded and asked if Tyler could hook it to the well pump for 5 minutes. Tyler said yes. While he was looking for a suitable cord on the workbench, He saw a clipboard partly covered by a folded rag. There were printed screenshots clipped to the board. Tyler only saw them for a second, but he saw enough. Each page showed a different online listing. One was for a camera kit, one was for a welding machine, one was for a dirt bike. At the top of each page was a first name, a phone number, and a time. Next to several names were brief notes in pen: alone, cash, truck, wife waiting. That was the point when Tyler's view of the situation changed. He said nothing. He reached for the cord, stepped back outside, and told Seth he needed the adapter from his truck. Seth looked at him for a second longer than before. What adapter? The 30 amp. Left it on the seat. Seth nodded once and said okay. Tyler walked quickly, but not so quickly that it would look wrong. He got to the driver's door, opened it, and kept one hand low near the ignition. Before he could climb in, he heard a second engine behind him. Another pickup had just turned off the service road. It stopped 20 yards away. A man Tyler had never seen before stepped out with a boxed air compressor in the back of his truck. He looked toward Seth, then toward Tyler, and then back at Seth again, trying to understand who all these people were. Seth gave Cole a short glance. Cole started toward the new truck. That was enough. Tyler got into his cab and reached for the key. He never made it. Seth was at the driver's door in 2 steps with a revolver held low against his thigh. "Stay in the truck," Seth said. His voice sounded different now. He was no longer trying to sound patient. Tyler froze. Cole had already moved to the back of Tyler's truck. The new seller by the air compressor raised both hands on instinct. He had simply seen the gun. Seth told both men to hand over their phones and wallets. Then he told the other seller to walk into the pump house. When Tyler hesitated, Seth pointed the gun through the open doorway and repeated himself. Inside, Cole zip-tied Tyler's wrists behind his back. He did the same to the other man. Seth emptied both wallets onto the workbench, counted the cash, and asked for bank card pins. When the other seller said he had only brought $40, Seth hit him across the side of the head with the gun and told him to answer properly. Tyler realized then that this was not a quick robbery that had gone bad. The clipboard, the stacked merchandise, the second seller arriving on schedule, all of it showed the same thing. Seth and Cole had done this before. Tyler gave a false pin. Seth looked at him and said, "If that number fails, he comes back for the boy in the blue Giants jersey." For a second, Tyler did not understand. Then he did. Seth had seen the photo of Tyler's son clipped to the visor in the truck. After that sentence, Tyler stopped thinking about resisting. He lowered his head, said the real pin, and waited. Cole walked the other seller outside toward his truck. Tyler heard doors opening, drawers being searched, and then the other man shouting once before the sound cut off. Seth stayed in the room with Tyler and used Tyler's phone to open his banking app. The cell signal inside the pump house was weak. Seth swore, stepped toward the doorway, and raised the phone higher. That small mistake created one brief chance. When Cole had zip-tied Tyler's hands, he had missed the small folding utility knife clipped inside Tyler's rear pocket. Tyler used work knives every day. He could open one with 2 fingers without looking. He pressed his tied hands against the pocket, got the knife halfway free, opened it against the leg of the workbench, and began cutting through the plastic tie. He had only cut halfway through when Seth turned back. "What are you doing?" Tyler stood up fast, swung the workbench lamp with both bound hands, and hit Seth across the side of the face. The bulb exploded. Seth fired once. The shot hit the wall near the door. Tyler ran through the back of the building before he even knew whether Seth had fallen or not. There was a second room behind the pump house, then a broken rear door, then rows of walnut trees stretching downhill toward a drainage ditch. Tyler ran straight into them with his wrists still partly bound. Branches hit his shoulders and face. He heard Cole shout behind him and heard Seth yelling for the truck keys. Tyler reached the ditch and dropped into it. There were 6 inches of muddy water at the bottom, and a concrete culvert running under the service road. He crawled into the culvert and stopped moving. For nearly a minute, he could hear both men outside. One of them walked along the ditch bank. Another kicked at the brush above the concrete opening. Tyler held his breath and pressed his body into the dark interior of the pipe. The cut zip tie was still hanging from one wrist. He used the knife again until his hands came free. Then his phone started vibrating in his pocket. Jenna. He shut it off so fast that the phone slipped from his hand into the water. He grabbed it back, saw 1 bar of service on the screen, and dialed 911 before the signal could drop. He spoke quietly and as fast as he could. Rural road, old orchard, gun, 2 men, another victim. Then the call broke. Tyler stayed in the culvert for another 11 minutes. Later, he would know the length of time only because dispatch logged Jenna's first call at 5:34 and the deputy's first radio traffic from the property at 5:45. Inside that pipe, it felt longer than that. When he finally heard a patrol siren on the road, he crawled out and waved both arms from the ditch. Deputies found him first. They found the other seller next, lying on the ground behind the pump house, bleeding from a cut over his ear but still alive. Seth and Cole were gone. So were Tyler's truck and generator. The truck turned up the next morning behind a closed gas station in Corning. The generator was missing. So were Tyler's wallet, cash, and cards. But the property itself turned out to be far more important than anything taken from Tyler. The orchard had been vacant for almost 8 months. The owner had died. The family lived out of state, and no one had been checking the service buildings. Inside the pump house, deputies found more than 24 items that had been listed for sale online in nearby counties during the prior 3 months. They also found burner phones, printed maps, stolen license plates, zip ties, and the clipboard Tyler had seen. The notes next to the listings were worse than he remembered. Some had only basic details: amount, vehicle, alone. Others were more personal: wedding ring, pregnant, elderly, child seat and back. The men had not been choosing targets at random. 2 days later, police identified Seth as Robert Haynes, a 52-year-old man with prior arrests for fraud and armed robbery. Cole was his nephew, 26-year-old Daniel Haynes, who had missed a probation appointment 3 weeks earlier. Daniel was arrested during a traffic stop outside Yuba City less than a month later. Robert was not with him and was never in that vehicle again. But the case did not end there. During the search of Daniel's apartment, investigators found a notebook with 43 pages of copied listing information from Craigslist, OfferUp, and Facebook Marketplace. Some pages were crossed out, some had addresses attached. 3 names in the notebook matched people who had filed robbery reports. One matched a man from Tehama County who had been reported missing after leaving home to sell a riding mower. Police could never prove Robert Haynes had harmed that man. They could prove he had used online sales to target strangers, move them to isolated properties, and rob them at gunpoint. Tyler testified at Daniel's trial the next year. He described the pump house, the clipboard, the gun, and the sentence about the photo of his son. That was the part he remembered more than the rest. Not the shot, not the run through the orchard, not even the culvert. It was the fact that a stranger he had spoken to for less than 10 minutes on the phone had already searched his truck, seen the picture clipped to the visor, and found the exact thing to say that would make him obey. And if Jenna had waited even 15 more minutes before calling, Tyler likely would have stayed on that property much longer than he did. Robert Haynes was still missing. Story 2: The Nursery. In March of 2023, Lena Ortiz was 28, 7 months pregnant, and trying to build a nursery in a 1-bedroom rental outside San Antonio. She and her husband Jesse had done the math several times. Buying everything new made no sense. So Lena did what many first-time parents do. She spent evenings on Facebook Marketplace, comparing bassinets, changing tables, and unopened boxes of diapers. One Tuesday night, she found a listing that seemed unusually good, but still possible. A woman named Heather Wells was selling an entire crib set for $250. The photos showed a gray convertible crib, a changing topper, 2 unopened sheets, a mobile, a diaper pail, and several storage bins full of baby clothes. Stores charged far more. But Heather's post said the family was moving quickly because her husband had accepted a job out of state, and they wanted most of the nursery gone before the weekend. What convinced Lena was not the price, it was the account. Heather's profile was 8 years old. There were family photos, old birthday posts, and prior marketplace ratings for lamps, side tables, and patio chairs. Lena messaged her. Within minutes, Heather replied with short, polite answers. Yes, the crib had all the hardware. Yes, there were instructions. Yes, cash on pickup was fine. Jesse told Lena to wait until his day off so they could go together. Lena agreed at first. Then Heather sent another message saying 2 other women were asking about the bundle, and whoever could pick it up first would get it. Lena made a choice Jesse would later call the worst cheap purchase decision of their marriage. She said she would go alone after work the next day. Before leaving, she shared the address with Jesse and her older sister, Maribel. The house was in a newer subdivision about 25 minutes away. Lena drove there just after 5 in the afternoon. It was still bright outside. Children were riding bikes on the next street over. Lawn crews were finishing up for the day. Nothing about the neighborhood suggested danger. The address led to a beige 2-story house at the end of a short cul-de-sac. A silver minivan sat in the driveway. A woman opened the door before Lena reached the porch. She looked to be in her mid-30s. She had blonde hair pulled back, leggings, and a loose sweatshirt. Her smile came quickly and stayed there a little too long. The woman introduced herself as Heather. A second woman, older and heavier, sat at the kitchen island with a mug in both hands. Heather said that was her mother, Janice, who was helping pack. Lena stepped inside. The first thing she noticed was how empty the house felt. There was furniture, but only enough to make the rooms look occupied. A couch, a television on the floor, 2 folding chairs, a card table with keys, and mail on it. The counters were clean. The walls were bare. The air smelled strongly of fresh paint and bleach. Heather explained it before Lena could ask. They had already moved most of their things into a storage unit, and the nursery was next. They walked past a room decorated for a baby girl. The crib in the photos was not there. Heather said it was already taken apart downstairs because her husband had started unscrewing it the night before. That made sense on its own. What did not make sense was how interested both women were in Lena herself. Janice asked how far along she was. Heather asked which hospital she planned to use. Janice asked whether Lena's mother would be staying with her after the birth. Heather asked whether Jesse worked close by or had long shifts. The questions came one after another, each spoken casually enough that Lena kept answering before thinking about why she was answering at all. When Heather offered bottled water, Lena said no. Heather laughed and said she understood because pregnant women had to be careful about everything. Then she led Lena toward the basement door. That house should not have had a basement at all, or at least that was Lena's first thought. Most homes in that area did not. But the lot sloped down behind the house, and the stairs ran to a lower level that opened toward the backyard. The basement was bright. The lights were already on. That was another small detail Lena would remember later. At the bottom of the stairs, Lena saw the crib part stacked against the far wall. For 1 second, she felt brief relief. Then she noticed the rest of the room. There were at least a dozen plastic bins filled with baby clothes sorted by size. There were 3 infant swings, 2 bassinets, and several monitors still in boxes. On a folding table sat a label maker, a laptop, 2 prepaid phones, and a thick binder. Next to the binder was a corkboard. Pinned to it were printouts from local hospital websites, maps of maternity wards, lists of visiting hours, parking instructions, and screenshots of Facebook profiles belonging to pregnant women Lena did not know. Several printouts had notes written across the top. Due in April, single, husband on nights, first baby. On one page, Lena saw her own profile photo. Under it, someone had written, 7 months, white SUV, teacher. That was the moment her body reacted before her mind had finished understanding what she was seeing. She stepped back and said she had left her wallet in the car. Heather did not answer right away. She turned toward the stairs and looked up, where Janice was now standing at the top. Then Heather looked back at Lena and said, "The crib is right here. Payment can wait." Her tone had changed. It was flatter now. Lena said she also needed to call her husband because he had texted. Heather held out a hand and said there was bad signal in the basement, but she could use the Wi-Fi upstairs. Then she took one slow step closer. Lena turned, walked past the crib pieces, and headed toward a half-open door near the washer and dryer. She said she needed the bathroom. Inside, the room was small, but it had a lock and a frosted window that opened toward the side yard. She shut the door, locked it, and pulled out her phone. There was no service. She opened her messages anyway and saw that Jesse had sent 2 texts asking whether the pickup was going well. Lena typed one word, police. The message showed not delivered. She tried calling 911. The call failed. Then she remembered her smartwatch. Jesse had given it to her the year before and insisted she keep emergency calling turned on. Lena held the side button until the screen changed and the watch began trying to place a call over its own cellular connection. At the same time, Heather knocked on the door. "Are you okay in there?" Lena did not answer. Heather knocked again, harder. Lena heard Janice's voice farther away speaking to someone else. A man replied from upstairs. Heather said, "Lena, open the door. The lock sticks. Let me help." Lena turned off the bathroom light and climbed onto the closed toilet seat to look through the frosted window. It was wider than it had seemed from the floor. On the other side was a gravel strip in the fenced side yard. She pushed the window. It moved halfway open. The watch connected. A dispatcher answered through the speaker, faint but clear enough. Lena gave the address in a whisper and said she thought the people in the house were trying to keep her there. The knocking on the bathroom door stopped. Then the doorknob turned once, then again. Then the entire door shook under a hard hit from the outside. Lena put her shoulder against it and looked at the window again. It was a tight opening, but it was possible. She pulled herself up, put one leg through, and pushed. The bathroom door hit her back again. A voice outside said, "Grab her when she drops." That voice was male. Lena put the phone in her pocket, got both hands through the opening, and forced the rest of her body after them. The window frame scraped both arms and caught on the back of her shirt, but she kept moving until she dropped into the gravel outside. She landed hard on one knee, stood up, and ran for the side gate. It was chained shut from the inside with a padlock. Through the basement glass at the back of the house, she saw a man rushing down the stairs. So she ran the other way, around the yard, through a flower bed, and over the short fence that separated the property from the next house. She screamed before her feet even touched the other side. A man mowing his lawn 3 houses down killed the engine and looked up. Another neighbor opened a garage door. Lena kept screaming the house number and yelling for someone to call 911, even though the call was already in progress on her watch. Patrol cars reached the cul-de-sac less than 6 minutes later. By then, Heather, Janice, and the man were gone. The minivan in the driveway belonged to a rental company. The house itself had been rented for 30 days under a false identity. Inside, officers found the nursery furniture from the listing, but they also found far more than that. There were binders on 21 pregnant women from the greater San Antonio area. Some pages were simple screenshots from public profiles. Others contained work addresses, due dates, hospital names, and notes about spouses or family members. There were multiple prepaid phones logged into Facebook accounts under different names. The Heather Wells profile that had messaged Lena belonged to a real woman in another state whose account had been taken over months earlier. Most of the baby items in the basement had been purchased cheaply, through other listings to make the room look believable. Investigators never recovered a written statement explaining what the group intended to do, but they did recover enough to know that Lena had not been chosen by chance. Search histories on the laptop showed months of marketplace activity directed at pregnant women. The accounts asked the same pattern of questions every time. First baby, due when? Husband home, pick up alone. Heather's real name was not Heather. It was Nicole Vance, and she had prior arrests for fraud and identity theft. Janice was her mother. The man in the house was Nicole's boyfriend, Eric Gann, who had a conviction for unlawful restraint from years earlier in another county. All 3 were arrested within 9 days. A hotel clerk recognized Nicole from a news report and called police after she checked in under another false name. At the preliminary hearing, detectives said the group had searched not only for nursery furniture listings, but also for local labor and delivery entrances, maternity floor security procedures, and ways to obtain hospital visitor bans. They also said that several of the women in the binders had been asked to meet at the same rental house. Lena later said the worst part was not what she had seen on the corkboard. It was how normal the first 5 minutes had felt. A clean kitchen, a woman smiling at the door, a mother drinking coffee, a crib deal that seemed worth a short drive. By the time Lena understood that the nursery was only there to get her into the basement, every exit had already been studied by the people who brought her there. She stopped buying baby gear online after that. Jessie picked up the remaining items in person from a police station exchange lot or from friends they knew. And when their daughter was born 2 months later, hospital staff had a copy of the police report in her chart before Lena ever checked in. Story 3: The Cabinet. In August of 2024, Owen Becker had been searching for a full-size arcade cabinet for almost a year. He was 24, worked IT support for a medical billing company outside Chicago, and spent most of his spare money restoring older game systems in the garage of the townhouse he shared with his cousin Malik. He did not buy rare things often. That was why the marketplace listing bothered him the moment he saw it. The seller was offering a working Time Crisis 3 cabinet for $900. That price was far below normal. Owen knew it. Malik knew it. Anyone who collected arcade machines knew it. The post said the cabinet had been sitting in storage since a family-owned sports bar closed. The seller wanted it gone that night because the building had been sold and a cleanup crew was arriving the next morning. The photos showed the cabinet from 3 angles with the guns attached and the screen lit. Owen sent a message expecting no response. Instead, the seller wrote back within 2 minutes. Cash only. Pick up in Gary. Bring help because it is heavy. No holds. The account name was Thomas Rivera. The profile was old and active. There were photos going back several years, comments from relatives, and a few previous sales of restaurant chairs and bar stools. Nothing about it looked newly created. Owen said he wanted to test the cabinet in person. Thomas agreed and sent an address in an industrial strip about 50 minutes away. Malik did not trust the price or the urgency, but he also knew Owen had been waiting months for this exact sort of find. So they compromised. They would go together, bring only the cash Owen was willing to lose, park facing out and leave, if anything felt wrong. They rented a cargo van because Owen had been too eager to wait and find a friend with a trailer. They left after dinner and reached the address just after 8:30. The building was a 1-story brick unit in a long row of small warehouses with roll-up doors. Half the units were dark. A few had padlocks. One had an auto glass sign with no lights on inside. The only visible people were a man standing near Unit 14 and a woman sitting on the bumper of a pickup truck. The man waved when the van pulled in. He matched the age range in the profile pictures. The woman stood up and said she was his wife, Jen. Both greeted Owen by name before he had introduced himself. Thomas said the power to that unit had been cut earlier in the week, but the cabinet had worked the last time they used a generator on it. He said if Owen wanted to inspect the internals, he had the back panel off and tools ready. That answer should have ended the deal. Owen had said clearly that he wanted to see the machine running. Instead, he looked at Malik. Malik looked at the cabinet sitting at the back of the unit, and the low price kept them there for 1 more minute. They stepped inside. The unit smelled of oil, cardboard, and damp concrete. The arcade cabinet really was there. So were other items that seemed unrelated to a sports bar closing. Camera lenses, power tools, boxed drones, golf clubs, and several unopened laptop computers stacked on industrial shelves. Owen crouched near the back of the cabinet and saw the exposed wiring. It looked intact. Thomas talked fast, explaining that everything in the unit had come from his late uncle's storage business, and he was trying to sell what he could before the landlord cut the locks. Malik kept turning his head toward a closed office door in the rear corner. He thought he had heard something on the other side. He said so. Thomas answered immediately. Old refrigerator. Makes noise when it cycles. There was no refrigerator anywhere in sight. Malik walked toward the office door anyway. Jen moved to intercept him and said there was nothing back there but paperwork. Malik opened the door before she reached him. Inside the office, an older man lay on his side on the floor with silver duct tape across his mouth and plastic ties on his wrists. His left eye was swelling shut. His wallet and phone were gone. For about 1 second, no one in the room moved. Then Thomas pulled a pistol from behind his back and told everyone to get down. Owen dropped beside the arcade cabinet. Malik backed out of the office with both hands up. The older man on the floor made a choking sound through the tape. Thomas told Jen to shut the front man door. Jen did that, then grabbed a length of cord from the wall and started toward Owen. This part happened fast enough that Owen would later remember it in separate pieces. Malik throwing a box of loose parts at Jen's face. Thomas firing once into the ceiling. The older man in the office kicking the door wider with both bound feet. Owen on his knees, crawling behind the cabinet toward the back of the unit. Not because he had a plan, but because there was open space there and no one standing in it. Behind the cabinet sat a second roll-up door with a chain hoist hanging at shoulder height. Owen grabbed the hoist and yanked. The door moved only a few inches at first. He pulled again, and the chain screamed through the mechanism. The metal door rattled upward high enough to let in alley light from outside. At the same time, Malik slammed into Thomas from the side. The gun went off again. Jen shouted for someone named Victor. A third man appeared from behind a stack of tires near the front of the unit. Until that moment, neither Owen nor Malik had even known he was there. Owen ducked under the half-open roll-up door and stumbled into the alley. He turned and saw Malik still inside on the concrete, wrestling with Thomas for the gun. Instead of running to the street, Owen hit the panic bar on the unit next door. It set off an alarm so loud that lights came on in 3 surrounding businesses almost at once. A man in an auto glass shop 2 doors down opened his rear exit and yelled that police were already on the way. That was enough to break the robbers' control of the situation. Jen ran out the front. Victor disappeared between the units. Thomas tried to follow, but Malik held onto his jacket until the older buyer, somehow back on his feet despite the ties, threw his full weight into Thomas's legs. By the time Gary police arrived, Thomas was face down on the concrete with the pistol several feet away. The older man from the office was named Richard Vale. He had answered a separate marketplace listing for a Canon camera package. He had been at the unit less than 15 minutes when Thomas and Victor hit him from behind, took his cash, and tied him up in the office while they waited for the next buyer to arrive. That buyer had been Owen. Inside the warehouse, police found 8 active marketplace conversations open on a laptop and 2 more on prepaid phones. The listings covered electronics, tools, restaurant equipment, and vintage games. Every item was priced low enough to create urgency, but not so low that people would dismiss it as fake. The accounts were not actually Thomas's. They belonged to real people whose Facebook logins had been stolen months earlier. Victims from 3 states were later connected to the same group. Most had been robbed. 2 had been beaten badly. One man from Hammond, who had gone to buy a welding rig, had never filed a report because he had brought cash from his employer and was afraid he would lose his job. Detectives learned about him only after finding his name and number in the seized messages. Victor was arrested 5 weeks later in Toledo while driving a truck full of stolen tools. Jen turned herself in after learning there was a warrant out for her. Thomas took a plea deal. During sentencing, prosecutors said the group had arranged buyers in overlapping time slots so one victim could arrive, while another was still being restrained in the back. That detail explained why Richard Vale had been left alive in the office. He was not an accident. He was part of the process. Owen never got an arcade cabinet from that trip. He returned the rented cargo van the next morning covered in dust, with one dent in the rear panel and dried blood on the inside of his right sleeve that did not belong to him. For weeks he kept thinking about the 2 things that had nearly kept him in that unit: the old Facebook profile and the cabinet itself. The machine was real, the photos were real, the wiring inside it was real. The plan only worked because there really was something rare sitting in the back of the warehouse, waiting for someone who had wanted it for long enough. Story 4. The Free Sectional. In January of 2025, Carol Mendel was 63 and trying to empty the house she had shared with her husband for 31 years. He had died the previous spring. The plan was simple on paper. Sell what mattered, give away what did not. Move into a smaller condo near her daughter by the end of the month. The sectional in the family room was one of the pieces she did not want to carry with her. It was still in good shape, but the moving company charged by volume, and the new condo had a smaller living room. So Carol posted it in 2 places, Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Free. Pickup only. Must bring help. Responses came immediately. Some asked if she would hold it. Some wanted delivery even though the ad clearly said pickup. One message felt different from the others. A woman named Jessica said she was helping furnish an apartment for her disabled brother, had access to a truck only late that night, and could pick up the couch around 10:30 if that worked. Carol preferred daytime, but movers were coming at 8 the next morning. She wanted the sectional gone. She told Jessica yes. Over the next few hours, Jessica sent several follow-up questions. Could a truck back into the driveway? Were there stairs? Was anyone there who could help lift one end? Did Carol have pets that might get loose during pickup? Did she have an alarm system that would go off if the front door stayed open? Carol answered almost all of it. At the time, the questions seemed practical. By the next day, detectives would read them back to her one by one and point out that none of them had anything to do with the condition of the couch. At 10:26 that night, Jessica wrote that she was outside. Carol looked through the front window and saw only a woman standing near the walkway holding a phone. No truck. When Carol opened the door, the woman apologized and said the driver had gone around the block to turn around because he had missed the house. Jessica looked younger than Carol expected, maybe 25. She wore black leggings, a dark hoodie, and white sneakers with no dirt on them, despite the wet street outside. She stepped in just far enough to see the sectional and said it looked great. Then she stopped paying attention to it. Instead, Jessica's eyes moved across the room, down the hallway, toward the kitchen, then to the back slider that opened onto the patio. She asked whether the couch came apart. Carol said yes, into 3 pieces. Jessica asked to use the bathroom while the truck was pulling up. Carol pointed her toward the half bath near the laundry room. Jessica walked that direction slowly. Too slowly. She glanced into the guest room. She glanced at the thermostat. She glanced at the small camera on the bookshelf and asked whether it was active. Carol said it was not connected anymore. That was true. A minute passed, then 2. Carol heard no toilet flush, no sink, no bathroom door. Instead, she heard a faint click from the back of the house. When she walked toward the laundry room, she found the half bath empty. The bathroom window was still closed. The laundry room door, however, stood slightly open. Beyond it was the mudroom, and then the back patio. Carol stepped into the mudroom and saw cold air pushing the curtain near the sliding door. The door was open by 6 inches, and through that opening, she saw the outline of a man standing on the patio, one hand on the frame, the other already inside the house. Carol did not scream. She did something better. She backed away, shut the mudroom door, locked it, and hit the panic button on the old home alarm keypad beside the garage entry. The siren started at once. At the same time, someone slammed a body against the mudroom door from the other side. Jessica appeared at the end of the hallway, no longer pretending she had ever gone to the bathroom. She ran toward Carol. Carol turned, got into the small home office off the kitchen, locked that door, and grabbed the landline from the desk. She called 911 and gave the address before the first kick hit the office door. Through the woods, she could hear at least 2 men and Jessica shouting over the alarm. One voice yelled to check the front. Another said the camera was dead. Jessica said the woman was alone. That last sentence told Carol more than she wanted to know. They had been discussing the house before they arrived. The office door bowed inward under a second kick. Carol dragged the heavy printer table in front of it and stayed on the phone with dispatch. The dispatcher told her officers were 3 minutes out. Inside that room, 3 minutes felt much longer. The intruders did not waste time on the couch. They went straight for the hall closet, the bedroom, and the kitchen drawers. Carol could hear footsteps crossing the house, cabinet doors opening, glass breaking, and then the office door taking another hard hit. A framed photo fell off the wall and cracked on the floor. The siren kept sounding. One of the men shouted from the front of the house that headlights were coming. The noise stopped all at once. Then Carol heard the back slider slam, the mudroom door jerk against its hinges, and footsteps running across the patio. When patrol officers entered the house less than a minute later, they found Carol still on the floor behind the desk, clutching the landline with both hands. One man was caught that night in a neighbor's yard after he tore his jacket on a chain-link fence and could not climb the rest of the way over. Jessica and a second man got away in a dark SUV parked 2 streets over. The man police caught was named Darnell Pierce. At first, he claimed he was only there to help move a couch and panicked when the alarm went off. Police disproved that explanation almost at once. In his pockets were a glass cutter, latex gloves, a folding knife, and handwritten notes with Carol's address, the word widow, and the line no dog. His phone held messages from Jessica discussing free furniture ads, older sellers, and whether houses appeared occupied by one person or several. Investigators later found that the crew had used the same method at least 7 times over 4 counties. A woman would answer a free item post, arrive first, ask to step inside, and study the layout. If the target seemed weak enough, the rest of the crew entered through a back door or side gate within minutes. If the target had family present, a large dog, or an obvious camera system, they simply left and moved on to the next listing. 2 of the earlier cases had started as burglaries and ended much worse. In one, an elderly man in Newark had been tied to a dining chair while his house was searched. In another, a woman outside Dayton had been hit in the head with a flashlight after refusing to open her bedroom safe. Both survived, but only because neighbors called police when they saw people moving property out after midnight. Jessica was identified 3 days later from neighborhood camera footage and arrested at a motel outside Springfield. The dark SUV belonged to her boyfriend, who was arrested with her. Both eventually pleaded guilty to home invasion, attempted burglary, and conspiracy charges. Carol was asked several times afterward what made her understand so quickly that Jessica had not come for the couch. The answer was simple: Jessica never once touched it. Not the armrest, not the cushions, not the detachable section. She walked in, looked at the room, and started taking in everything except the one thing she had supposedly come to get. Carol sold almost nothing else from that house after that night. Her daughter and son-in-law handled the rest. Pickup happened only during daylight, with 2 cars in the driveway and the front camera fully working. Months later, after Carol had already moved into the condo, detectives called to tell her that Jessica's crew had a spreadsheet with more than 60 public listings saved from Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Beside many of the addresses were short notes: elderly, late pickup okay, garage side door, widow, alone. Carol's address had 1 extra line under it: alarm old but active. That one detail was probably the reason she was still alive. The crew had been wrong about many things in that house, but they had been right about one: the alarm was old. It was also loud enough to ruin their entire plan. Online marketplaces make one promise without ever saying it directly: that both people are there for the same simple reason. One wants to sell, one wants to buy. Most of the time that is true. The problem is that a listing can also tell the wrong person exactly what they need to know: who is home, what is inside, how badly the seller wants the item gone, whether the buyer is willing to drive to a quiet place to save a little money. And once that information is in the open, the meeting is no longer only about a couch, a crib, a cabinet, or a generator. For the people in these stories, the sale was only what got them to the address. And by the time they understood that, the stranger at the door was already inside, or the road behind them was already empty.